Okay, I'm back. Something I guess is going on with my phone. I have always had issues with live videos on my phone, so I'm just on my iPad. I think it's from where I've dropped it way too many times. It's like got a bunch of cracks in it, so it's probably, I don't know, some antenna is broken that is supposed to help with my connection. But anyways, so on to what I was trying to talk about was that about boundaries. And so what I'm going to be talking about today is how to hold boundaries, and how to establish what your boundaries should be, because you're really the only person that can determine what those rules should be for your house, because they're your kids, your house, you're the parent. And how you can hold those boundaries respectfully, because I feel like there's like a lot of debate about that going on right now in the parenting talk, about how to respectfully hold a boundary without being permissive, but also without being authoritarian. So I was wanting to do this on Instagram and TikTok, but I can't get it to work. I don't know, my phone sucks. So anyways, as we know, gentle parenting a lot of times gets like this bad rep because it puts out to the outside world, or maybe just anybody viewing a specific moment, it can look more permissive, because we may be emotionally accepting and understanding of our child's developmentally appropriate behavior, and their emotional reactions to things and their emotional intelligence, but we still have limits and boundaries around what behavior is appropriate and acceptable. And that's really what differentiates us from permissive parenting. And the thing is we will realize sometimes that the behavior is pushing, the behavior of pushing the limit is sometimes a cry for help, or an unmet need, or communicating a lack of development of a skill. And we will shift to meet that need, or to accommodate, or to like prioritize actual teaching instead of just arbitrary connection just for fitting into social standards. But that doesn't mean that you're being permissive. It might look like that to the outside world, but it doesn't really matter. Hang on. For example, if your child is acting out, yelling, throwing things, being hateful, and you take a moment and realize that, wow, they haven't eaten since 10 a.m. and it is now 6 p.m., you may meet their need for hunger before addressing that is not appropriate behavior. But that doesn't mean that it is permissive. So just wanted to clear that up really quick. So in order to figure out what your boundaries should be, the first thing that we need to consider is your parenting values. In general, our values they're like the basis for a lot of our decisions just in life in general. So naturally, your parenting decisions need to come from your parenting values, and boundaries is one of your parenting decisions. So yeah, it's important that we are like aware of the values that we have on our parenting. So take a second to think about it. I think that like 5 is a really good number to stick with for like a foundation of values for your home. But once you figure out what your 5 are, I'm going to give you a list here in a second. Once you figure out what your 5 are, you can put them below in the comments if you want to. Some examples of hang on. I have a list here. So here is a list of a few parenting values that you can base off of. This is just a list. Yours doesn't have to look like this, but acceptance, adventure, art, autonomy, authority, beauty, belonging, challenge, compassion, courage, creativity, curiosity, dependability, family, fitness, freedom, generosity, gratitude, honesty, humor, inner peace, integrity, intelligence, knowledge, mastery, mindfulness, music, nonconformity, order, obedience, passion, practicality, respect, risk, routine, stability, tradition, or wealth. You don't have to pick one from this list. This is just to give you some ideas. This is actually a list from the book Oh Crap, I Have a Toddler. But I just wanted to give you that list in case I was like, what are your parenting values? And you were like, blue, all the values that I know in my head are gone. But just wanted to say that there are no answers that are wrong. There's no choices being wrong. Like, being successful and happy in your parenting is making decisions that you want for you, not what you think other people think you should do or what it looks like for someone else. That's why respectful and gentle parenting looks a little bit different for everyone. And I know that some people may have heard me say this in the list and like cringed a little bit because I had said order, obedience, compliance in the list. And I know that this might be like a controversial opinion in parenting talk right now, but in my opinion, you can have those values in your parenting and still identify with authoritative, gentle, respectful parenting, as long as you are implementing those values in a respectful way and not a coercive, manipulative way, which is pretty distinctively authoritarian, like blind obedience. Like, you can have obedience without blind obedience. Just my opinion. Yeah. So, well, I'll go ahead and tell you what my personal parenting values are. While you guys, if you want to put yours in the comments, you can. So mine is my 5 parenting values are emotional security or emotional intelligence, playfulness, respect, integrity, and connection. Yours don't have to look like mine at all, or really anyone else's, because I based those off of what I needed as a child, which was emotional security and connection, and I incorporated the values that I want to instill into my children, which is respect and integrity. And then I also threw in my personality, which is playfulness, because I am a playful person. I'm very weird, and I am like Chandler. I find humor in a lot of things and feel like it makes situations easier to deal with. So like, yours don't have to look like mine or anyone else's. So the first step in being able to figure out what your boundaries should be is figuring out what those core parenting values you have for yourself and your family. And based on those choices, based on your choices of your values, will be the foundation of your choices for choosing your limits and boundaries. And I also wanted to mention that it's 2022. Your choices are not written into stone. We have like digital, you can, backspace, delete, you can mark it out, you can erase. Like, you're not tied to these just because you identify with them right now. You can change how you feel based on what you're drawn to. Maybe your priorities shift, maybe your child's temperament or personality is different and you need to adjust the way that you parent. And there's nothing wrong with changing your mind. Like, the hypocrite culture is so toxic because you're allowed to change your mind. That's called growing and developing, learning, changing. It's just like a part of our natural process of life. Like, I don't know why that would be considered hypocritical. But, hang on. Sorry, gotta take a drink. I've gotten so spoiled by flavored water. I can't even drink regular water. I've always struggled with drinking water, but anyway. But hopefully now you have made yourself aware of what your values are and what values you have for your parenting, I mean. And so it's time to talk about like the rest of the piece that plays into how you should determine what your boundaries should be. And that is realistic expectations. Realistic expectations are based off of developmentally appropriate behaviors. So in order to have realistic expectations for your child, you need to be able to determine how to tell whether the behavior is developmentally appropriate. So in order to determine whether a behavior is developmentally appropriate, you have to take in a bunch of factors. Sorry. So you have to take in their physical development, their social development, their emotional development, their individual personality and temperament, as well as their tolerance to changes in routine and environmental factors like a pandemic. So, this can also be determined by you knowing the things that you've already taught them, like the social interactions that they've already had, or multiple of other things that vary from child to child. So that's why nobody else can really tell you what your rules and boundaries are, because nobody really knows the development of your child better than you do. And that's why we can't really judge someone else for their boundaries, because their boundaries for their kids, because we have to meet our kids where they are. And like I said, nobody knows your kid better than you, and you don't know someone else's kid better than their parent. So I'm going to use a other TikToker for an example here. Rachel Rogers. I love her. So she made a TikTok the other day. It was probably a while ago now from where I had started writing this. But she'd made a TikTok about how her daughter wanted to play in her makeup. And Rachel had this boundary of, you can't play in my makeup unsupervised. And so Rachel sat down with her and played with her in the makeup. And people were mad. They were mad. They were like, didn't understand why her kid was allowed to play in makeup, or they thought that that boundary was weird or something. I don't know why people were mad. But the thing is Rachel probably has the parenting value of freedom, exploration, curiosity, or something like that. So that went into her decision for having that boundary. And she understands the developmental stages of her child, so maybe she knows that she can play with makeup in the appropriate way as long as she's supervised. And she doesn't trust her, or not doesn't trust her, but she knows that she's not developmentally ready to play in makeup unsupervised because she can't follow her mom's directions without her being there, or maybe she knows that she'll get easily distracted. There's a lot of things that go into her boundary that I personally don't know, but I'm just saying, like, those are some examples. So to some people that might have looked permissive, like your daughter was getting mad that she couldn't play in makeup and then you let her play in makeup. But the thing is she had a boundary that she had established for reasons, and that was aligned with her values, aligned with, the goals that she had for her child, and she held it respectfully. So that's not permissive. It might look permissive to you, or it might look like a stupid boundary to you, but it doesn't matter, because it aligns with her and her goals. And so this kind of, like, not trying to like get on a rant or whatever, but this is why it's not empowering for us to focus on what other parents are doing wrong or other creators are doing wrong. Like, it just isn't empowering to the cycle or to the community of cycle breakers, because the more you're focusing on them doing it wrong, the less you're focusing on what you're doing and how what you're doing is right for you. Anywho, sorry for that little rant there. But anyways, there is definitely like developmental stages based on age or other factors, and like neurologically developmental things for children, like for example, it's not really developmentally appropriate for a toddler to understand the concept of sharing or to have impulse control. So those kind of general things are things that you can usually like assume about your child's development, but other things, it takes more like in-depth knowledge and connection with your kid to be able to determine where they're at developmentally on a social and emotional scale. But like I was mentioning earlier, you know your child better than any developmental chart or developmental specialist, and you know your child's maturity level better than any TikTok creator or coach or anything. So it's really up to you to determine where your child is at developmentally. And only really you can do that unless you get like a home evaluation behavioral specialist or something to come and do a home visit at your house. So, if anyone has any questions on what goes into understanding how to determine what a developmentally appropriate behavior is, you can go ahead and ask, and I will try my best to answer. But I'm going to go ahead and move on to my next topic. So that's really all that you need to know to be able to start determining what developmentally appropriate behaviors are for your house and having realistic expectations. A few things that you can ask yourself to help you make sure that you're staying in the right mindset when setting these realistic expectations or boundaries or whatever. So, what is this boundary teaching? Which of my parenting values aligns with this boundary? If this were me, would this boundary leave me feeling disempowered, unvalued, or disrespected? Should I expect this boundary to be something that requires very little influence from me, or should I expect to be having to be more involved in setting and holding and establishing this boundary? That last one is mostly just for you to set realistic expectations for yourself so that you're not getting mad whenever you have to keep repeating yourself over and over. If anyone has some boundaries that they have just thought of, or maybe they've already had in their house and they feel like it's more solidified after talking about these things, then you can go ahead and drop them in the comments below. I would really like to hear them, but you don't have to if you don't want to. But before we move into the next thing of getting into what gets in the way of you holding boundaries, I also wanted to mention that developmentally appropriate behavior, because I've been seeing this being talked about. Developmentally appropriate behavior doesn't just mean, oh, well, nothing we can do, it's developmentally appropriate, blah. But that's not what it means. Developmentally appropriate behaviors are what give you expectations. Knowing those is what gives you the expectations. But you can still teach replacement behaviors. This is a thing that I've learned from High Impact Club and Rachel. But you can teach replacement behaviors, and that is how you help them develop more. You don't just allow the developmentally appropriate behavior that is not wanted to just keep happening. You can teach replacement behaviors. Just expect the behavior to happen. And also you can put like physical barriers or physical things to keep the developmentally appropriate behavior from happening. Like, I'm sure that you guys have heard of the concept of like setting the environment. Like, for a 2-year-old, naturally, if they are walking outside and they see the open road, they are going to run for it. Or they're going to at least want to run for it. So, you wouldn't just be like, oh, well, it's developmentally appropriate. They're just curious. I'm just going to let them run in the street. There's no cars coming anyway, so it's fine this one time. I mean, I don't know. You might do that. But I wouldn't. And I don't really recommend that. But, anyways, my train of thought. So you wouldn't do that for a developmentally appropriate behavior. But you also wouldn't want to punish them for that curiosity. I mean, like, that's a natural, curious part of them. So, things that you could do would be setting the environment, setting those physical boundaries that I was talking about, where you can, if you are against a toddler leash, I'm sorry that's what I'm going to say, but a toddler leash is a good option. Holding hands, carrying them, maybe, having them hold your pants or hold your purse, or, or maybe instead of playing in the front yard, you guys play in the backyard where there's a fence and it's not like open road and super enticing to their curiosity. But that's just an example. But because, neurologically, children until at least the age of 7, at least until the age of 7, children's brains don't really have the ability to consistently have self-control or impulse control. It's something that they might use regularly, but it's not really fair to like regularly expect it from them because their brain isn't developmentally ready to be doing that on a consistent basis. A lot of adults can't even do that on a consistent basis, but that's a different conversation. Whew. Okay. So, it is an important job as a parent to be able to teach your child that sometimes there are things in life that we want that we just can't do. And while it's hard and it sucks, that's just how it is. And as gentle parents, we comfort them in that disappointment and help them navigate through it instead of just avoiding it or dismissing it. And that's really what gets into the meat and potatoes of what's next and why respectfully holding boundaries is so freaking hard sometimes. Because it's like we've been conditioned from toddlerhood that our emotions are bad. And so when we see our child dealing with something as like intense and difficult as disappointment, jealousy, frustration, and we feel uncomfortable because we don't know what the heck to do with that. I don't know. So it's like we either don't know what the heck to do with it, or we swoop into rescue mode because we see it as this like huge terrible thing for them to be feeling. In short, what I am talking about ultimately, like what that discussion was mostly just talking about, like believing all feelings are okay, but in short, it all boils down to your thoughts and your beliefs, or your beliefs and then your thoughts around those beliefs, and the way that we manage our thoughts. Because you can't always control your thoughts. Sometimes you're going to have some that are disempowering, but you don't have to subscribe to it. You don't have to take it in as your truth. But anywho. Oftentimes, our child will behave in a way that is developmentally appropriate. And we have this expectation, like this realistic expectation. Like we know that they're just communicating, or it's a lack of a skill, or they have an unmet need, or it's just an emotional reaction. But, like, we have this idea that, this thought that whenever this happens with our children, that it means something about them, or something about us that it does not mean, or something that is disempowering. Those thoughts often stem from our psychological or our emotional triggers and our beliefs around those triggers. Some of the beliefs that we have that are disempowering, and they will like fuel these thoughts and encourage us to be more reactive, or feed into our own negative self-talk. And that's why they need to be addressed in order to respectfully hold boundaries. Because a lot of times we will say, yeah, I believe that. Yeah, I got it. And then our actions don't really say that. So, to be frank, we don't. We may want to, but we don't. So, and matter of fact is, if we don't, and we just keep telling ourselves this more empowering belief over and over and over and over without really addressing the disempowering belief, then, that's not the way to getting you to believe something. And it's just even more frustrating, because then you're like, why can't I just believe this? Why can't I just believe? But, so I'm going to work you through the steps on how you actually believe a belief that you want to believe. So, the first thing is awareness of the beliefs, the ability to identify a disempowering belief, or to at least identify a thought that stems from a disempowering belief. And a lot of this really starts in like trigger management, which that is a whole nother discussion, but because the thoughts that you're having when you're triggered are usually thoughts that are powered by our disempowering beliefs, which is kind of ironic if you think about it, like a disempowering belief powering a thought, but whatevs. For example, the thought of, oh, this is embarrassing, of when you're, hang on. Sorry, messed up. For example, the thought of, oh, this is so embarrassing, or when are they just going to get over this, or are they seriously upset about this right now, or whatever your thoughts are that you want to make sure that you take a note of it, and then get really curious with it, and then investigate where it comes from. To continue with the example of, oh, this is embarrassing. Hang on, sorry, gotta take a drink. It's a lot of talking. So to continue with this example of, oh, this is embarrassing, when your child is having a tantrum in the store, that's your thought, that this is embarrassing. So what you want to do is you want to get really curious with it. Like, kind of like a toddler. You want to ask yourself, okay, so why is this embarrassing? And you would answer yourself and say, well, because everyone is looking at me. And it's like, okay, well, why does it matter if they're looking at you? And it's like, well, because they're looking at me because they're going to think that I'm like a bad mom. And it's like, so why would they think that you're a bad mom? And it's like, well, because look at him. He's like having a fit over nothing. He just is mad because he can't have candy. Like this type of situation does not warrant this type of behavior. And there it is. You have identified a few disempowering beliefs in this one single thought pattern. So, in this train of thought, there is the belief that the parent in this example believes that other people's perception of them in a glimpse in the moment of their life has anything to do with determining their worth as a person, their worth as a parent. And that can really lead to being very overwhelmed and having a lot of pressure on you to perform for the outside world. And that is very disempowering. So, second, the belief that my child's behavior reflects on my abilities as a parent, which, again, puts a lot of pressure on you as a parent and does not have any accountability for understanding developmentally appropriate behaviors. And if anything, your child's behavior is simply communication to you. Communication of a need, a skill, a lack of a skill, a lack of emotional intelligence, or just that they are having an emotional moment. It does not mean that you're failing as a parent. Your child is their own person as well, so yeah. And then third, the big belief in this is that this feeling is not okay. And this is not something worth being this upset about. I think that you can kind of directly see how disempowering that belief is right there, because it's very emotionally invalidating. And if you end up yelling, being authoritarian, or permissive in these moments, this is going to be a tough one. You are also subscribing to the belief that other people's comfortability or my ego is more important to me than my child's emotional security and the development of their emotional intelligence, and more important to me than my decisions as a parent, which include your values and your boundaries. I know that is taken out of context, that can sound really shamey and shaming yourself and being mean to yourself, but if anything, it's really just direct. And the only way that anything is ever going to change with your mindset and how you feel about holding boundaries in these emotionally escalated moments is it takes you being aware of what beliefs that you're actually holding, what you actually think, and how you're actually thinking through the process. Because sometimes it's like we just follow these unconsciously. So it's important that we be very objective and curious and bring out what it really, like what we're really thinking, what we're really subscribing to. And also, I just want to say that a lot of times our brains have ingrained these beliefs in our heads to protect us at some point. So there's really no need to feel guilty or shame yourself for holding on to a belief or finding out that you have a belief that's like, wow, why would I ever think that? Because in all honesty, it's probably been conditioned into you sometime from your childhood. And it's been being reinforced through your upbringing and through your life experiences, and you've just been mindlessly following it for decades, stuck on autopilot in the going through the motions. So that's why being mindful and intentional and conscious is very important. So here's what you can do about it. Once you have identified that belief, I want you to determine whether it's empowering or not, or whether it aligns with your parenting values or your parenting goals or not. And does it support you in achieving these goals that you have for your family, for you as a parent, or for your children? And I want you to encourage to avoid looking at this in a true or false type of way, because in reality, truth can be very subjective, especially in these kind of things where the facts that we have to rely on in determining the validity of a claim that a belief is making are our personal life experiences. And I'm sorry if I'm the first one to tell you this, but if you are a cycle breaker and have relational trauma or anything like that, then you can't really rely on the initial thoughts and beliefs that you have about these things, because your brain has been conditioned to operate in survival mode or self-preservation mode, and you have all of these conditioned biases from the way that you were raised, and you're trying to parent differently. So you don't know what you don't know, you know what you know, and you know what you have experienced. And so basically what I'm getting to is, if you approach things in a this is true or this is false or this is right, this is wrong, then you're ultimately just setting yourself up to argue with yourself and breed self-resentment or self-doubt or just bitterness about your life experiences, and that's not very empowering or productive. So try and just avoid that. Stick with, is this empowering or is it not? Is this aligned with my goals or not? I don't know who this is. Somebody asked me to go live with them. I don't know who that is. But what was I saying? Oh, does this align with my values or not? Does this support my goals or not? And if you have determined that it's not a belief that you want to keep in your headspace anymore because it's not empowering, or it doesn't align with you, or it doesn't really fit your goals, then here are the next steps. Accept it. I know that might sound completely ridiculous, counterintuitive, like, why would I accept something that I'm trying to get rid of? But let me just lay it out for you. So, whenever we become aware of these thoughts, a lot of times we can build resentment towards ourselves for even having them. And then we can beat ourselves up for continuing to have them come up. And that is why you need to work on accepting them, accepting that these are things that are going to come up for you. No matter if you've done extensive work to unbelieve them, they still might come up. And accepting that they are going to be a part of your brain from now on is just a way to really skip over that whole phase of, I hate myself for feeling this way. Why can't I just stop feeling this way? How do I stop thinking like this? Because you can't. Like, have you ever tried to not think about something? If you've tried to not think about something, then instinctually you're gonna think about it. Duh. But and ultimately it just like builds our frustration even more. And this is like, I feel like, where a lot of parents quit trying to be conscious and mindful parents, and they just go back to what they know because they don't like feeling like crap all the time, which is understandable. Nobody wants to feel like crap all the time, but you see how it feeds into your reactivity. So in order to be able to believe what you want to believe, you have to accept the beliefs that you don't like, the ones that are disempowering, the ones that like you feel icky about. You have to accept that they're going to happen. You can separate yourself from the belief and the thoughts by saying, I notice I am feeling this again, or I notice I am believing this, or I notice I am thinking this, and then it separates your identity from that belief and thought. So instead of saying, I can't be patient with my kids. You can say, I'm having the thought that I can't be patient with them. It separates it from you and makes it an outside piece. And this is a good segue into the next part, which is replacement behaviors. Or, not replacement behaviors, replacement beliefs. I have made a video about beliefs that are disempowering and beliefs that you should try to maintain as a cycle breaker. But a good place, sorry, I gotta take another drink. I know I just took one. I'm almost out of water. But a good place to start, if you already have a list of beliefs that are disempowering, is, that's a good place to start, is what I was saying. I also just want to mention that it's important. Hey! I just wanted to mention that whenever you're trying to stop believing the beliefs that are disempowering, which are what's making it hard for you to hold boundaries, then you don't want to just do the opposite of a disempowering belief. Like, you don't want to identify that you have this disempowering belief that, oh, I don't know how to help my kids. You realize that that is your disempowering belief. You don't want to just opposite it and say, well, I want to believe that I can help my kids. Because ultimately, if you don't believe it and something happens with them and you don't really know how to react, then you're just really reinforcing that negative, disempowering belief instead of trying to reinforce the one that you want to believe. So that can just be even more disempowering. So I encourage people to have beliefs that are more attainable in the moment, or realistic, or something that you can start doing right now. Like, to continue with the example of, oh, I just believe that I don't know how to help my kid whenever they're having big feelings, then you can change it to, I believe I can figure it out. I believe that we can figure this out together. I trust myself to learn what to do. And those are things that you can take hold of, like, right now. Yes, be realistic to your situation. You gotta meet your kids where they are, and you also gotta meet yourself where you are. And that's like, it makes me sad whenever I see so many parents on here in people's comment sections and saying that, well, I just can't do it like that. Like, your gentle parenting in your house is not gonna look like anyone else's. It's just not. So, but this goes into what I was going to say next about how to continuing these beliefs is having reinforcements. So think of a belief as like a table. So a table needs legs to reinforce it so that it doesn't fall on the ground, and it supports it so that you can, rest on a table or whatever. And your beliefs all have reinforcements. In your brain, for the negative beliefs, your brain has been finding things to make it true and using those to reinforce that belief. So to kind of take the power away from those disempowering beliefs, then you can identify those things that are negative reinforcements to those disempowering ones and take the validity and the power away from those. And you can do the same, your brain will do the same thing with the empowering ones. That's why with my clients, whenever I'm trying to help them with establishing a more empowering belief, I say that it is so important that you practice it every day. Maybe not like all day, every day, but say it in your head or out loud in the morning or while you're driving to work, or just at some point be mindful of the new belief that you're trying to establish. And then your brain will do the same thing that it does for the negative beliefs. It will look for ways to prove that it is right, because our brains love being right. I think everybody knows that. Everybody loves being right. So that is a way that you can establish those core foundational legs to support the beliefs that you want to have in your life. For example, if you are working on the belief that we were talking about earlier, like, I want to believe that I can help my, that I can learn how to help my child in these emotional moments. Your brain is going to find everything that you're doing to solidify that. So doing the, like, listening to a training from me or from other TikTok creators, it's going to solidify that, because you are putting in the effort to learn how to help them. And then that is just one little leg, and your brain is like, yeah, we can learn how to do this. I don't know why I keep getting invites. Like, I don't know who this person is. I don't go live very much, so I don't know how all this works. But and whenever you, even if you just don't know what to do whenever your child is having a big moment or any kind of emotional reaction, and you just don't respond reactively, you maybe just walk away, or you don't do something that you normally would have. That also is another leg that reinforces that belief that you are trying to establish, because it just reinforces that trust in yourself. But we have to be careful and mindful of our thoughts around this, because sometimes whenever things don't go exactly the way we want them to do, we will use those to remove the reinforcements and the support that we are trying to establish in this belief. For example, let's say your child is having an emotional moment and you respond in a way that is not what you want to do. You could get into this thought pattern and think of, oh, see, I knew I couldn't do this. Like, why did I ever think that I could do this? And see, I just can't help my child do these things. Like, look at this, I'm terrible. And that is not a very empowering thought. And so instead, you could reframe the way that you view mistakes and failure, because ask any successful person, this is a little off from parenting, but ask any successful person, mistakes and failure are essential into getting to success, because your mistakes are just communication of things that you need to change. Or just like with our kids, we say that behavior is communication of either an unmet need, a lack of a skill, or just some kind of environmental factor. And that's the same thing in this situation, is you can use that moment to reflect on, instead of make it mean something about you that it doesn't. So, yeah, that can be kind of deep, but that is the major thing that I see in getting in the way of people holding boundaries. It's your thoughts and beliefs and your thought patterns. So if you have other reasons, or if anybody knows any other reasons that are reasons people struggle with holding boundaries, even whenever they've established them and they want to be respectful, then you can comment them below, and then I'll try to make content relevant to that topic, or I'll try to answer them. So on to respectfully holding these boundaries. So in situations where there is an unmet need or emotional dysregulation, the approach that I like to use, feeling bad. Yeah, and that's like what I was talking about, is you have to like reframe the way that you think about things, because I know that sometimes things suck, but it's like if you reframe it and think of it as you helping them, which is what you are, like that's what you're trying to do, then it can help you feel a little bit more better, make you feel better. But I understand feeling bad. I still feel bad sometimes. But in with situations for an unmet need, or yeah, me too. I used to do that a lot too. And the same. Sometimes I still think that I fall into permissiveness sometimes. Yeah, just because I would rather be permissive than authoritarian. And it's like sometimes I just don't know what to do, so I would rather just do nothing. I know that sounds terrible, but it's like I'd rather just take a moment than do something reactive. So, yeah. Stop inviting me. But whenever our kids are having unmet needs or emotional dysregulation, like, I feel like the best way to approach it respectfully is to meet their need or help them get emotionally regulated, because this is talked about all the time, so it's like a broken record, me going off right now, but they do not have access to the logical reasoning side of their brain. They're full on in survival emotional mode. So anything that you try to teach them is just going over their head. They're not getting it. So it's most respectful to you for you to expect your child to not be soaking up what you're saying in those moments, and it's respectful for you and your time for you to not spend so much time trying to convince them or spend so much time trying to correct them whenever they can't even really hear you. So that is my approach in those moments, and that is really most of the content that is shared on gentle parenting, which is why I think that so many people are nowadays thinking that gentle parenting is permissive, because people only ever talk about how to respond in these moments. Yep. Exactly. Because it's like if you try to do it tomorrow, then they're like, what? What are you talking about? So, it's good to always like directly address it, but not directly addressing it doesn't mean like right now in this moment. You know, you gotta get them to the point where they're able to hear you. So otherwise you're just wasting both of your time and your energy. So that being said, I could see how on the outside or to other people it's like gentle parenting could look like permissive, but it's not, because in other times whenever our child isn't in like emotional distress, the way we respond is quite differently. So even though hang on, something got messed up in my thing, so now I gotta go back to paper. I'm sorry. But so like even though we understand that it could be communication from an unmet need or whatever, we're gonna directly address the behavior and begin teaching replacement behaviors, which is something that I've learned from High Impact Club and Rachel Rogers. So we could say something like, I could tell that you were upset because you were doing these unkind things. I see now that you were upset just because you were hungry. I know it's hard when we're hungry, but whenever you get that feeling in your belly that you're hungry, you can come tell me. You can go get a snack, or you can point to the fridge, or really just whatever you want to teach them to do instead. And this doesn't have to be a, let's sit down and talk about it, honey. Let's talk about this time that you did this. It doesn't have to be like that. It can just be like, hey, I saw you doing this, and you can do this instead. Like, this is not the best way to approach this situation. Or you can do it through play with their toys. Like, you could play with them, play out the situation, and, have the discussion that way. Or Daniel Tiger, Bluey, all of these really good kid shows also teach these lessons as well. So look into those shows and then sit and watch them with your kid, and then you guys can talk about it after. And anytime you've done one of these, you can do the others to just reinforce it. Yep, teaching and guiding what's expected. Yeah, like, I think that people forget that we do that part. So it's pretty important. But, and I also just wanted to touch back onto realistic expectations, because it's fair to assume that your child is going to continually need you to redirect them to this replacement behavior that you're teaching until they have learned to master that skill on their own. And it's like, especially if it's something that they don't want to do, it's something that you're going to have to probably remind them of, and having that expectation leads for you to not get as frustrated. And there are lots of resources on positive discipline. There are a lot of positive discipline parent educators here on TikTok, and there's a lot of positive discipline books. So I could talk about that for like another hour. To be completely honest, I could. So my next training is going to be on that. But I just wanted to definitely go over some positive discipline strategies, that can help you with respectfully holding boundaries, kind of briefly, but I can go into more detail about them if you got questions or something. So, the first thing that I think is very helpful is offering age-appropriate choices. And an example of that being, I hear you want to watch a movie tonight, it's bedtime now, would you like to listen to music while you lay down, or do you want to just snuggle with your stuffed animals? And this also kind of depends on age, but you have to be careful with the choices that you give. You have to make sure you are okay with them. And I think that it is a good idea to have a specific set of choices, not just, well, what do you want to do while you lay down? Because then they could say something completely off the wall and you're like, what? No. And then it kind of just feeds, it inevitably will end in a power struggle at that point, because it's like you offered, here, take some control. Here, you can have a little piece of it. And then you're like, no, it's mine. You can't have any. So it's like, all right, bye. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later. So, what I was saying is that it breeds them being in a power struggle. But whenever you give them choices, you are still overall in control of the situation, but it gives your child some control as well, and, keeps from power struggles, and everybody likes to have a little bit of say in their life. So, and the next thing that I think is helpful sometimes is say yes in the future or in fantasy. An example of this being, you really want candy before dinner. We don't eat candy before dinner. But yeah, I bet that candy would taste really yummy. If you could eat it now, which one would you want? Or you really want that candy before dinner. Yeah, you can have it tomorrow because we don't eat candy before dinner. I personally don't use this strategy very much, but I have talked to people where it is super beneficial, but I think it's because, like, anxiety runs in my family that this is not something I like, because it just, to me, it would just make me more frustrated, and I think it makes my son more frustrated, so it doesn't work for us, but it might work for you. Because some kids it works really great for. It's just, you gotta trial and error that one a little bit. And then also, this is pretty much the same as replacement behaviors, but you want to tell them what they can do. For an example, the boundary is no jumping on the couch. And your kid is jumping on the couch. You could say, hey, the couch is not for jumping. If you want to jump, let's jump on the floor, or jump on these pillows, or jump on the trampoline, or whatever they can do. This is way more empowering than just being told no all day long. Accountability words. This is actually something that I learned from Allison. She was in here earlier, but she left. And it's more effective with older children, probably like 8 or older, maybe 7. I don't know. Depends on your maturity, like I was talking about earlier, or your child's maturity. It's basically where you and your child have established a word or a phrase where you both know that when someone says it, that things are getting escalated, hostile. Somebody is feeling attacked, somebody is feeling disrespected, and there just needs to be a mental pause and a check-in. An example of this being, you tell your child that the school called and said that they didn't turn in their homework. And you ask, could you tell me what happened? The child replies with, yeah, it was too hard, and the teacher wasn't listening to me, and you can tell they're very defensive. And you can say that, but I hear you. How did you try and get your teacher's attention? And they reply with, I don't know, you're treating me like I'm lying, getting more and more defensive. And you can respond with your accountability phrase, whatever it is, and say something like, it looks like you're hearing something I'm not saying, and I'm not calling you a liar. I'm sorry that my words are making you feel that way, but I just want to know what happened. I'm speaking to you respectfully, and I expect you to do the same. That is like a coined phrase from Allison. I don't know if she got it from somewhere else, but I'm speaking to you respectfully, I expect you to do the same, is something that I use with my stepdaughter and my little sister, who is a tween, that I learned from her. So, Allison Perez, that is who I'm talking about. And you can respect their answer, you want to ask them, I'm speaking to you respectfully, I expect you to do the same. Do you need a minute, or would you like to continue this conversation? You can respect their answer and then re-engage later if they said they needed a minute. And that is an example of how to use an accountability phrase. And I think that it really helps keep you accountable if your child uses it for you, or if you use it for your child, it helps hold them accountable, and also makes you more mindful of how you're speaking and how you're interpreting what someone else is saying. And the next thing is natural or correlated consequences. So a natural consequence is basically allowing an inevitable consequence to occur, or something that would naturally happen. A correlated consequence or a logical consequence, I kind of took the phrase correlated consequence from Rachel because she had pointed out that logical consequence can make people feel kind of stupid. It's like, well, it doesn't seem very logical to me. Like, never thought about it that way. So I really like using correlated consequence, and that is why I use that. But correlated consequences have to contain 3 R's: respectful, reasonable, and relatable. So, an example being, the boundary being toys get picked up each night. Out of water. Good thing I'm almost done. And they didn't do it. The correlated consequence could simply be you have them pick up the toys they didn't last night before they get to do anything else. Or it can be putting that toy away for the rest of the day. I like to use this for specifically troubling things. Like, for example, my son's sand. He loves kinetic sand. He got it for Christmas. And I really like it too. It's a cool thing. But he has a really hard time putting it back in the tote for me to put it away. And I like him playing with it. It entertains him for a while. But he will make a huge mess with it and then run off to play with something else. And it became a reoccurring issue. So I started using the correlated consequence that if you do not pick up your sand and I have to pick it up, then it's getting put away. And you're not going to be able to play with it for the rest of the day. And sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't. But it's just I see a lot of times where taking away privileges or things is coined as like authoritarian, but I don't really agree with that all the way. I just don't think it should be like what you immediately jump to, or it shouldn't be something like unrelated, like you spoke to me disrespectfully, so no iPad, or you can't play your video game. Like that doesn't make any sense. But anyway, the whole point is whenever you implement a correlated consequence of like taking away a privilege or putting away a toy that is a reoccurring problem, it's more of I am helping you with this, and you had a hard time doing this, which is a lot different than you did a bad thing, I'm taking your stuff away so you have to suffer little thing. So that's the difference. Anyways, the biggest aspect of respectfully holding boundaries is being considerate to your child's needs, emotions, and their development, but still not using those things as an excuse to not hold your children accountable for their behaviors. Sometimes you do all the things and they're still pissed off. Like, that doesn't mean you didn't hold the boundary respectfully. It just means they're mad about it. They don't like it, which pretty freaking normal. And that's where it goes back to the core belief that all feelings are okay, that your child's reactions and behaviors does not reflect on your worth as a parent. And that's really it. If anybody has any questions about respectfully holding boundaries, you can go ahead and ask them. But I'm kind of wrapping it up here. So, because that's really all I've got. So, I hope this training was helpful. I am going to post the replay on my Instagram, maybe YouTube. I kind of started a YouTube channel a long time ago, but never. Well, thank you so much for watching the whole time. Yeah, so I'm going to post the replay on my Instagram and most likely on my YouTube. I don't know if I'm going to like commit to a YouTube channel, but I started one a long time ago. Or if you just want this live replay emailed directly to you, then you can just message me, or I think TikTok has a hard time with messaging people sometimes, so you can click over to my Instagram and email me or message me your email, and I will email it to you. And if anybody has any feedback, you can give it to me in a respectful way. I love improvement. I love changing my perspective on things. I like getting kind of respectfully called out on a thought error that I have. So, yeah. I would appreciate it if I said something that you're like, whoa, what the heck, Janae? But, anyways, thanks for listening. I will see you guys later. Peace out.